You're watching the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook from Wednesday, September the 30th through Friday, October the 2nd. I'm only going to issue a wind forecast through Friday because we have so much coming up this weekend. All eyes on Joaquin down in the Atlantic nearing the Bahamas, drifting at about 6 miles per hour to the southwest. So we are really watching this as these tracks are starting to bend a little bit more westward now at this point. So some of the American models have it coming up to here, and then the European model is still split heading out to sea, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But for the most part, what we have is this frontal boundary approaching the coastline, and is expected to buckle and clear the coast by tomorrow, with this high pressure to the north is wedging down behind it. Now the pressure right now is at 1,032 millibars. It's expected to continue down to the east-southeast and drive these northerly winds down the coastline. So that's what we're looking at for tomorrow, is northeast to east-northeast flow meeting low teens, possible mid-teens peaks along the backdoor sea breezing effects. Another thing that we have to watch for is this upper level trough. It's more of an atmospheric river driving across the southeast region, and that's keeping plenty of moisture and cloud texturing aloft. So we've seen a lot of interesting cloud sunsets and sunrises for the last couple days, but it's going to get pretty messy here pretty soon. And we're watching this little area right here. You can see the cold front buckling over the mountains, and that's indicative of a negatively tilting trough that's developing over that portion of the country. Now, the idea here is that a mid to upper level low could develop right here, and that's going to be a huge factor in what happens with Joaquin, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But for right now, I'd like to take a look at our local radar. We can see ahead of the cold front, we see some of these storm lines building, especially inland right along the sea breeze front. I saw that today on some observations with some thunderstorms that flared up heading to the coastline, where it was really dry, and you can see on radar there's no precipitation occurring over the coastline, and there's relatively blue skies with some higher clouds mixed in up at the top. So we have relatively dry air along the coast and a lot of storming and rains along the sea breeze line inland with a very mild southeast flow. Okay, now let's look at the data scope. I put this into motion. This is our storm track that we're using for Joaquin, and I'm putting this into motion. You can see the rain lines. You can see all of this moisture aloft streaming all the way up through South Carolina, North Carolina, up into Virginia along these rain lines ahead of the cold front. Now, if you look over here in this area of the Appalachian Mountains, you can see some of the wind readings are starting to do a sort of a counterclockwise spin, and that's indicative of low pressure developing in that area. It's more of a mid-level low, but it does have its effects at the surface, especially near the mountains. So we're really watching this area because there's going to be a negatively tilting trough, which means it's basically just a dip down into the United States. And we will take a look at how that is going to affect Joaquin. Elsewhere down near Florida, there's a weak surface low that we're also keeping an eye on, with some rain banding trying to get wrapped up around it. We're not really sure. This is remnants of Invest 99L, so we're really keeping an eye on that as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the Joaquin 2-day graphical outlook. We're seeing a Category 1. Winds are sustained at 85 miles an hour. The pressure has dropped to 968 millibars, and it is expected to continue to strengthen into a Category 2 and possibly a Category 3. So, area to watch here. Okay, the other disturbance that we have is remnants of Ida, and the remnants of Ida are expected to drift to the northwest and then ultimately to the north. So this is also one to watch in such close proximity to Joaquin. It may have its effects. So if we look at the cone of uncertainty that the National Hurricane Center has issued, we can see where this hurricane sort of meanders down along the Bahamas. There are warnings already issued in the southern Bahama chain, and as this hurricane scoots down over the Bahamas and starts its northerly lift, they're going to feel it. They're going to feel quite a bit of it on the western and southwestern side of this hurricane. And then we see this northerly track. Now, this cone of uncertainty does not reflect the actual path that it could take. It's as of right now, it's going to be updated at 5 p.m. and then again every 3 hours at 8 p.m., 11 p.m., and so on and so forth. So we'll have to continue to watch to see what they are showing as the track or projected path of this hurricane, as it is so uncertain at this point. You can see 8 a.m. Saturday, they have an M marked right here, and that's indicative of major hurricane. So we're looking at Category 2, Category 3 status at that point. Okay, here are the latest track guidances, and you can see the tracks steering more westerly as time goes on. we can't take that for granted because the models have been so shifty, going to the north up to New York and New Jersey, all the way down and filtering further and further south. Each update every 6 to 12 hours, we've been seeing this track sort of been more and more westerly. So we're going to have to really watch these models and see what they say. They're only there for guidance. They're not actually what's going to happen. Okay, so here's Joaquin. First, let me go to the long floater. I want to show you some of the deep convection that's being wrapped around this storm right now as it intensifies. Now, you can see this track down near the Bahamas. Very impressive convection going on around the center. Very good convection wrapping around. The visible map, we can see what looks like there was a little bit of an eye trying to develop earlier, and again as we get into the evening hours. So some very good radial symmetry going on with the outflow aloft being very healthy. We're seeing a really good healthy breathing storm with plenty of moisture wrapping around. It's over 30 degrees Celsius water, which is about 86 degrees. So all the criteria for further development of a storm is there for this one. Okay, so if we look at the earth.nullschool.net, I want to further that by saying here's the surface. I put a little circle there, and we talked about in the earlier forecasts and some of the earlier educational points that in order to have a healthy hurricane, you have to have outflow that goes up through the middle, out through the top, funnels out in a very, very symmetrical way. So it goes straight up and out. And if we look at the 500 millibar, this is about 18,000 feet up. We'll see where that center is, and it's right over the middle as it was at the surface. And if we go even higher up to 34,000 feet, we see that it is still placed there. So this is a very healthy breathing storm that has vertical stacking all the way up and around the center of it, and we're expecting to see an eye very soon. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the 500 millibar chart, and I want to show you what is the guidance, the steering guidance for the system. Right here we have high pressure to its north. So when we have high pressure to the north of a surface low like this, that is called a Rex block. And what that does is it sort of pushes the entire, whichever way the high is going and the low is going, usually goes with it because of this steering current right here to the north. So we have an easterly steering current, and it sort of bends down with a northerly flow down around this low, and then you see this other high pressure ridge over here to the southwest of Florida, and that's giving it its southern sort of element. So that's why we're seeing this very gentle nudge to the southwest over the Bahamas, because of this mid-level steering. It's very weak, but it's just enough to keep that storm drifting to the southwest. And as you see, we see this trough starting to develop over the United States, moving towards the southeast. Now watch what happens as we go in time. I'm going to go up one full day to October the 1st, which is tomorrow on Thursday, and we see this mid-level low actually form just on the windward side of the Appalachian Mountains. And you can see which way the wind's starting to steer up the coast, up into South Carolina and North Carolina at this level. And then you can see how this high pressure ridge is starting to build down further from the north above Joaquin. As we go another day out, we see this low pressure, this mid-level low, actually drop down further towards the northern Gulf of Mexico, up in the northeast Gulf of Mexico area, and you can see how the wind field is actually pulling all of this air and all of this energy up into the Carolinas. And so that's kind of a scary thought. You see this giant ridge building out here, this high pressure building with these easterly winds, and that all of that sort of is a guidance system to bring any kind of storm in this area right into the Carolinas. It's kind of scary. It's not for sure. It's not certain. This is all just a GFS guided wind pattern for 2 days out. So we really have to keep an eye on it. Now if we go back to now, I want to look at the upper air level. Take a quick peek at the 250 millibar. We see this very strong jet going from southwest to northeast, and that's where all that atmospheric river and all that upper air moisture is coming from overhead, and that's keeping the atmosphere nice and juicy. It should, as that negatively tilted trough bends down towards Florida, this jet actually should pull anything up the coastline. So this area is somewhat favorable, very favorable for further development, because there isn't any upper level shear going on near this storm. We see some of this upper level diving down and wrapping around the low. It's actually helping some of the spin even up high for the high pressure that's aloft over the system. Okay, going to models, I want to take a look at the models. Now here's the GFS model that is valid from 12 o'clock today. The next one will come out at 6 o'clock tonight, and then every 6 hours for this particular one. And I'm going to put this into play. Now this is at 0 hours. This is for today at 12 o'clock. And I'm gonna start forwarding this, and you can see how it's drifting down. And then we see it head to the north, and then it buckles over into the North Carolina coastline. So that's the GFS at 90 hours out. That puts it at Sunday, 6 o'clock a.m., and then into noon Sunday. So Sunday morning, if the GFS model is correct, then that could be a significant impact for that area, and we would even feel it down here in Charleston. So real quick, in the upper dynamics, I'm going to go to what I was talking about earlier about this negative trough. Now here is, go to 0 hours. Here's this trough right here that I was talking about, and it's got this buckle to it right here. It's negatively tilting, which means it's sort of bulging southwards. And as we go in time, we'll see that mid-level low start to form even wider, and then here we go. So we see it guiding the storm. Now watch what happens right here. I'm gonna do this one kind of quick so you can see. All right, it looks like they spun around each other and then become one on Monday, October the 5th. Now we would call that a Fujiwara effect, when you have two low pressures that orbit around each other and sort of have a slingshot effect. And that looks like the case of what the GFS is doing with the storm. It's slingshotting it right into the coastline, wrapping around and combining it all together for Monday, October the 5th. Very unique thing, very rare thing to see happen. Is it possible? Yes, but for certain, no. We shouldn't assume that that is going to happen, but that is why these models are starting to bend more to the west because of that. All right, let's take a look at the Euro model. Now the European model is betting on something different, with Ida's remnants out here to its west and this high pressure ridge to the northeast to actually help guide the system around. So it's working on a whole different set of data. It's probably including this negatively tilted trough as well, but it's betting more on the systems to the east and to the northeast to pull it away from the coastline. So if we put this one in motion at 0 hours, here's one day, this is Thursday, so we get into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And we see how it's pulling it away, and if we go even further out to Tuesday and then into Wednesday of next week, we see that the Euro model is pulling it away, and you see this high pressure ridge down here that has dropped down from the north and has guided the storm out of the picture. So that is what is guiding it. Now you see Ida here, it combines with Ida, this high pressure ridge to the east of where the storm was, guides the storm on around. So the European model looks like it's betting more on the surface ridge to guide this storm around and out of the picture. Now if we look at the upper dynamics for the, go back to the 500 like we saw in the GFS, and here's at 0 hours. Now it does show the same negatively tilting trough with the upper low, the mid to upper low developing here over Alabama, Georgia, and dropping down over the Florida coastline. And that's exactly in tune with what the GFS is showing, except the GFS is pulling it to the coastline and the Euro is taking it away. So there's still a split in the models, and it makes it very difficult for a forecast when you see this kind of picture right here with these tracks starting to lean west. Now when you have more models jumping on board with one particular scenario, the cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center will start to lean in that direction. But you can definitely see the split. This line over here is the Euro model, and then most of these other models are joining over on the American side here and putting it into the coastline. So it's definitely something to watch. We should not take anything for granted. These models are only there for guidance. We'll have to take it day to day. We may know more tonight once the storm actually makes a turn north and starts to track northward. We'll know more about that. Okay, so that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report plus Tropics update. Keep an eye on it. I'll be keeping an eye on it and keeping you posted on the latest. Thank you.